we're also building toward the game after that. And it's the one you keep asking about.
The Elder Scrolls 6 is so far away that I reckon I'll probably see grey hair on my scalp before we even get a proper trailer, but I thought it would be good fun for me to jot down my ideal Elder Scrolls 6 in this video, so you all know my vision for the game. It's worthy of note that this video will not represent what will be, but what I would like it to be. I don't know why I'm doing this. I think it's like some 4 pillars rite of passage or something. I mean, both James and George have done videos like this, and here I am jumping on this bandwagon. Some of this may be a tad on the ambitious side, but please do bear in mind this game won't be out until at least midway through the next generation, and there's no reason to believe that what I'm saying won't be possible in scope at that point. That's not to say that I expect any of this to happen, because Fallout 76, need I say more? Yes, it does appear as if Bethesda game studios have grown lazy. However, if you want to see a video on how they could possibly fix that, I did actually make that video, so I'll leave a link in the description and at the end of this video. I'll go into this video assuming the points made in that video were rectified, so think of this as a follow-up video if you will. If that doesn't turn out to be the case, then I'm going to find the highest cliff in this game and jump off of it. But anyways, please do enjoy this video of my ideal Elder Scrolls 6. First off, let's start with the story. The story isn't necessarily important in how it plays out and what happens, this is just how I want the game itself to be. There are a few things that need addressing with the story though. The main story needs to be longer and more challenging, and it needs to feel like it takes time to get from the start to end, and not just a few hours. Also, the game needs to be more lore heavy in the main story and everything else, as Skyrim was a little light on this topic and people noticed this. So as long as the narrative they choose to pursue isn't bad and they choose to actually improve upon the length and the challenge of the main story, then I won't complain. As for the location of the Elder Scrolls 6, another topic that isn't too important, so we're going to sweep it under the rug quite quickly. However, I do believe the game will probably be set in somewhere like Hammerfell, because the CGI trailer we got at E3 2018 was broken down by avid Elder Scrolls fans who chalked the geography down to the western coast of Hammerfell. And to be fair, that's probably the greatest contrast to Skyrim, and thus I'd imagine it being the perfect setting for the Elder Scrolls 6. We won't rely too heavily on Hammerfell being the location in this video though, in case it's not. However, if you want my personal opinion, yes, I would love the Elder Scrolls 6 to be set in Hammerfell. Onto the engine. Now, it's no secret that the creation engine has seen better days, so for optimal experience that would have to be removed and replaced by a newer engine. However, Todd Howard has confirmed that Starfield and the Elder Scrolls 6 will utilise an upgraded version of this very problem engine. So we're going to assume that nothing has changed and the Elder Scrolls 6 will in fact use the heavily overhauled version of the creation engine in a best case scenario. So though it might still be the creation engine at its core, it's heavily overhauled, and maybe for once they'll actually start attending to the glitches that are embedded in this engine. So with any luck, even though the Elder Scrolls 6 may still be using the same engine that they used for Morrowind fundamentally, it may not experience those very same glitches that every game in between has. Now, I know ideally it would be a different engine entirely and they'd actually rework it from the ground up so that it doesn't have these issues and doesn't have the chance of having these issues. It has already been stated the Elder Scrolls 6 will be running on the creation engine of some form. So unless God reveals himself to Todd Howard and tells him to stop, I don't think that's going to change. Now, when it comes to overall gameplay, I'll talk about most things in more detail in their own little subtopics, but let's just say overall the gameplay needs to smoothen up a lot. It's never been particularly smooth in the Elder Scrolls, being clunky at the best of times, barring Oblivion, which was so smooth, though it felt way too light if you get what I mean. It's not an urgent issue, but the gameplay does need a bit of updating since Skyrim. Now, I can't quite pinpoint what exactly causes it, but in Elder Scrolls games and Bethesda Game Studios games like this and Fallout 76 and Fallout 4 and so on and so forth, for example, there's something that just breaks the fluidity of the gameplay. Now, I'm not sure if fixing that is doable in the creation engine, but if they manage to do that, that'll be a huge bonus. So how the game actually plays essentially needs a bit of revamping. Now, I think the biggest issue with how the Elder Scrolls plays is the loading screens between areas. In 2019 and beyond, because let's face it, we won't see this game for years yet, total seamlessness is not an impossible task. It may be a huge undertaking on the creation engine, which is probably why the creation engine has seen better days. The only times when we should really be seeing loading screens are when we're loading into the game, fast travelling, or travelling to areas in different cells very far away from the main game's map, or when we've died and we're waiting to load back into our previous save. The game would probably yield greater stability in the long run if everything was built onto one cell as well, because most of my game crashes came from loading into small specific areas. With the creation engine, I'm not sure if this is possible, but considering that Bethesda intend to keep this engine, they should find a way to make it so. Of course, like in all other Elder Scrolls games, off the bat you'd have to create your character, though I'd appreciate if the Elder Scrolls 6 dropped this Bethesda's prisoner fetish, because that's far too predictable at this point. I don't care how it starts beyond this as long as you're not a prisoner anymore, though you'd have to find an environment equally as compelling to start this adventure, such as maybe being a farmhand on your parents' farm whose races and appearances will be defined based on your choices when it comes to what race and appearance you choose to have for your character, at which point something forces you to go out into this world. In order to keep this stranger in a new land sort of feel, maybe you won't necessarily start in the same province that the game takes place in, or maybe you're in a far corner of it and everybody you know winds up dead. We already know that morbid depression and the Elder Scrolls go hand in hand, so this doesn't necessarily matter so much because, like I said, the story isn't important to this video. Off my little tangent and back to character design, however, races of choice would include the usuals: Nords, Imperials, Redguards, Bretons, High Elves, Dark Elves, Wood Elves, Orcs, Fizhy and Argonians, each with their own perks that may affect your playstyle at least to begin with. Customizable features should include your facial features, height, muscle toning, complexion, hairstyle and colour, facial hair, scars, etc. Maybe adding tattoos is a little bit of fun. Yep, I got the Oblivion logo tattooed. It'll just be a fun little thing to faff with, where you can have as little or as many as you want and you can place them where you want them to be. Of course, war paints is another thing that they could bring back. Another interesting thing would be bodily scars, though it would be interesting if you could pick those up as you progressed along the main story. Once done with the character creation, I like the whole class build system that was completely gone in Skyrim. I think it should make some form of return where you can choose your starting skills to promote your class off the bat, giving you immediate perks and benefits to promote your chosen playstyle as opposed to going with the flow and winding up with a complete class clusterfuck where nothing you do makes your playthrough any different to any other players. This way you can play the game with actual classes and skill sets that won't necessarily prevent other playstyles if you choose to switch further down the line, but will help you get started if you choose to go for a harder playstyle to commit to, such as the mage class. Like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to dictate your entire game experience, but it would be a good way to start. Leveling should be balanced in favour of how you choose your class, at least to begin with. Leveling up your core skills increases your level faster than leveling up other skills, for example, making it easier to level up while playing your playstyle, at least to begin with, and therefore helping you commit to that playstyle. Though if you level your other skills past your chosen class skills, they may help boost your leveling too. So once you're done choosing a class, it will forge your early hours of playtime, but it won't be too hard to make a switch if you wish to change your playstyle up later on. The possibility of switching your playstyle will have to be done very carefully, however, otherwise too much balance may cause every playstyle to wind up being the same jumbled mess of skills, and ultimately you won't be able to figure out whether or not you chose to be an absolute nutcase with a massive axe or a collected mage. I think the way to do this would probably be to make switching up your playstyle easier the earlier you do it, as in order to switch the playstyle best suited to your character, you would have to level up your other perks beyond the perks chosen in that selected playstyle. I don't think there needs to be any level cap per se, as that would limit your development of your character past a certain point, which would kind of feel stunted. However, I wasn't a massive fan of making skills legendary and having to start again from scratch. One minute you're a legendary swordsman and the next you're like the local idiot swinging your sword around to next to no effect. Perks and things need to be plentiful and effective, but not overly powered though, otherwise you'll find yourself met with no challenge pretty early on. Enemies should be scaled to your level, allowing you to do more or less anything at any level, all the while retaining a rather tame challenge. I'm not a huge fan of having areas that you can't go to earlier on because they're higher level, which is fortunately not something I've had to experience in the Elder Scrolls. But at the same time, you'll want to retain an even level of challenge, so enemy level scaling makes sense. At the same time, at higher levels, more dangerous enemy types should spawn, who are harder to deal with even if they are the same level range as you, which ups the challenge as you go, which should be balanced out by all the perks and skills and things that you've amassed as you've leveled up. I think this would provide a better balance and you wouldn't wind up with some ridiculous power fantasy at the end like you would in Skyrim.
Yes! Oh, great and mighty Grand Champion! Is there something you need? Can I carry your weapon? Shine your boots? Back rub, perhaps? Oh, gee. You sure? Okay. Well, I'll be hanging around the arena grounds if you need someone to worship the ground you walk on. Bye.
Wait, hang on. What the fuck? In Elder Scrolls games, NPCs are notoriously blocky, something that needs to change. First of all, the Elder Scrolls 6 needs a lot more voice actors to up the variety of the voices. It does kind of wreck the suspense of disbelief when everyone sounds the exact same. Furthermore, NPCs need changes in their routines, so as much as they need one, it needs to be somewhat malleable. So one night a character might be at home with his family, the next in the tavern, maybe the next day he's gone elsewhere for work or etc. Dialogue with NPCs can yield friendships or on the other hand complete mutual loathing. Alongside this, you can perform odd jobs for them to bolster this relationship, which can develop further than just friends if that suits you. Though not all will be open to this, as some may already be in those relationships. NPCs will have relations with locals in their environments, some may have children, and others may have a significant other or both, some may be friends with one another or even have friendship circles, and this should play into your interactions with them. So if you befriend one of them, you have an advantage with the others, and if you cross one of them, then you'll be at a disadvantage, that sort of thing. Others may have rivals who, if you befriend one, you immediately become ill-favoured by the other, and so on and so forth. Quest givers may not be off the bat asking for favours all the time either, some being more reserved and waiting for you to strike up a friendship, others may give you quests through overhearing dialogue, some may still ask favours off you off the bat, but it adds to the immersion and helps establish an immersive society in this way, if not all quests are accessible the moment you start interacting with this NPC. Now on the whole, I'm not too fussed by the NPCs as they are in the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, but there are some little minor tweaks that could make them better, like these. But if there's one major thing that I would like them to improve, it's make the NPCs not stupid, because this is just hilarious. So on the subject of towns, villages and cities, there is one thing that I do want to mention, more so about cities. They need to be bigger. My nan lives in a tiny village, and yet it's bigger than what counts as a city in Skyrim. This needs to change. Even if that means a lot of NPCs will be inconsequential and will not have any interactions and will just say stuff and not care about you at all, the cities in the Elder Scrolls 6 need to be significantly larger and have a significantly larger population. On top of this, these areas need to feel alive, with fitting ambience highlighting how bustling with life these cities are. Large markets where you can buy and sell wares, conversations to overhear around every turn, districts so that those of higher class are in different areas to those who are impoverished. So you might find a beggar's corner which is different in tone and feel to some of the richer districts of the same city. It doesn't necessarily have to feel like the big cities in The Witcher 3, but in that direction would be a good goal. As it stands, take Whiterun for example, supposed to be the trade hub of Skyrim. So why is it that I've seen graveyards more lively than this place? So the towns and cities need to be bigger and more lively. At the same time, they could do with being more unique. Now, most of the cities in Skyrim are actually unique to a degree, however, then you've got the smaller sort of city/town areas where they all more or less look the same. These need to be unique and lively as well. You want to be able to look at a building and be able to tell where you are based on that. At the same time, cities and towns and villages in different areas need different kinds of culture. For example, structures in colder environments will be more insulated and the population will wear more cold-appropriate clothing, whereas in hotter environments, the architecture and clothing on NPCs will be adjusted to suit that. Furthermore, you need to have a noticeable difference between one town and the next. Different architecture, weather, different cultures in NPCs and the like. Now, in the major cities of Skyrim, there were definable differences, but if we compared Morthal to Riverwood, the only difference is one isn't foggy. And if an area isn't unique, then it's not memorable. So to summarise this entire point, towns, villages and cities need to be more memorable, they need to be bigger, and they need to have a greater population. They need that to create an atmosphere to boost the immersion. In Skyrim, guilds are developed to the point of predictability. You could do them all and rise to the head of every guild on one playthrough, and you didn't even have to be the right fit. For example, I once did the College of Winterhold questline using mostly melee and only magic when I had to, which was very rare. So how did I manage to become the Archmage of the College of Winterhold when none of my magicka skills were any higher than 40? It is quite simple, the guilds in Skyrim were lazy. So for the Elder Scrolls 6, this needs a change. The guilds need to be less predictable than quest after quest until after a couple hours you're suddenly the head of the guild. There need to be more turns, and ultimately you don't always need to be at the top come the end. Also, when joining the guilds, you should at least need to be so good with the skills relevant to that guild. So joining the Mages Guild, you need to be relatively accomplished as a mage. To join the Fighters Guild, you need to be a good fighter. To join the Dark Brotherhood, you need to be a ruthless murderer with a knack for stealth, and so on. Also, being a part of one guild may stop your character from being a part of another. That way you can't wind up in guilds with contradicting beliefs or rivalries, and thus keeps the immersion. The guild questlines need to be more fleshed out and paced, so it doesn't feel like only an in-game week between joining the guild and becoming the highest ranking member of it. To rise up the ranks in a guild should take a decent amount of time, and you may need to advance your own skills to access the higher level quests of the guild, breaking it down and allowing for some time to pass so you won't wind up being the leader of the Fighters Guild within a week, for example. Ultimately, there's a lot of work that can be done in this department to get rid of the repetitive, empty guild feel of Skyrim. Now, there's no set way to explain what I'd like to see as far as quests go, as it'd vary from quest to quest. There does, however, need to be variety in every aspect of the word. From getting the quest, the objectives that the quest entails, the outcomes and the rewards all need to vary depending on that quest. That way you don't wind up doing 10 quests that feel the exact same. Of course, simple bounties and the like should return. However, for the unique quests, they need to be, well, unique. Now, the Elder Scrolls never hasn't done this, but it's time they took it to the next level. Quests should also be rich with lore where appropriate, though you don't necessarily have to endure all that if you don't want to. Characters in quests should be unique in personality and design, giving them a memorable look and feel. And quest givers shouldn't necessarily give you the quest right away. Maybe have it so a lot of quests are locked until you gain the trust of the quest giver, which may mean that you never even know that the quest was there unless you bothered to gain that trust of that specific NPC. This doesn't have to be the case all the time and should vary depending on the personality of the NPC who is giving the quest. Some, for example, would be quicker to trust than others. Now, I don't necessarily have too many issues with how the quests are structured in Skyrim, though some do need a bit more flesh to them. So there's not really much improvement that needs making here. However, one thing that would be more interesting to see would be different kinds of outcomes depending on the decisions you make that may affect your entire game. Say you choose to spare someone's life in one quest, they might show up in another one at some point. Little things like this will make it seem like you're really making an impact as you're doing all these quests. Followers in Skyrim are a bit of an odd bunch. They follow you around and don't say very much at all, have limited interactions and have no real personality barring Serana. So let's use Serana as the model for how followers should be executed. Definitely not this kind of executed. They need to feel attached to your character, allowing you to converse with them while travelling and so on. You form a friendship with these characters as opposed to having mindless NPCs following you around. This would definitely stop people from finding exotic ways to kill their followers whenever they get bored of one. Now, in my opinion, followers are actually done better in Fallout 4, which is surprising. So if this is anything to go by, I'd imagine we'll have a greater connection to our followers in the Elder Scrolls 6 anyway. We should be seeing conversations unique to these followers, and maybe even once trust is high enough, side missions around them where we learn about their past and help them resolve unfinished business. Maybe as we travel through the world, instead of being there in bland silence, have our followers telling us stories or just rambling on about the scenery as it passes. Say a certain dungeon you pass in the distance in clean view. The follower comments on it, saying how they heard it might be infested with bandits, for example, and that they should probably steer clear. Or if passing by a city, tell a story about the last time they were there, and so on. Maybe as passing through towns, villages and cities, they might run into someone that they might know and they might have a brief conversation with them. These interactions may or may not yield unique quests. Followers also need their own horses, so while you're on horseback, so are they. Or if they don't have a horse nearby, they can call it and have it conveniently appear. Not the cleanest method, but it keeps you having to wait around for your follower to show up once you reach your destination. And if their horse is somehow killed, it will stay that way and they will just jump on the back of your horse until they reach the next town. Followers are an area that need a lot of improvement in the Elder Scrolls, and hopefully with these points rectified, followers will be significantly better. When it comes to the open world, this is quite a simple point to make. Even though it does sound like a big one, it isn't really. What we want is for it to be aesthetically pleasing and filled with life, things to do, places to go and see, and plenty of backstories to these places. And that is literally it for the open world. It needs to be a decent size, but not massive for the sake of being massive, and be absolutely packed with interesting things worth exploring. However, if there is one thing that could do with a little bit of touching up, it could probably be the fast travel. Fast traveling to anywhere that you've already discovered from anywhere is a little bit too convenient, and it steals from being able to take in the world. So instead, why not just have fast travel between big cities? Or alternatively, you could do what The Witcher 3 did, which was have signposts where you can fast travel to other signposts, which may take you to different districts in different cities, crossroads, villages, and etc. This would give players more reason to actually take in the world as opposed to just going back and forth really quickly between locations. This might be a little inconvenient at times, but I think that overall it would make for a better experience. Another thing I'd like to see in the open world would be different ecosystems in different environments, different kinds of trees, say in colder areas, different kinds of nature, etc. Different cultures of people on the whole, which will create a higher contrast and actually allow for you to understand whereabouts you are on the map without having to look at a prompt. Anyways, as much as the open world is a big thing, I think I've covered everything that needs to be covered with regards to how they can improve the open world in the Elder Scrolls 6. Now, my biggest peeve with Skyrim about dungeons, forts, caves and all that is each one feels the exact same, obviously barring the differences in architecture. Say a Dwemer ruin feels different to a Nordic one. However, within these respective subdivisions you can barely tell any difference. On the scale that the Elder Scrolls is for these caves and things, making them all different would be a nearly impossible task. However, simple quirks and features can help make them all feel unique and memorable, such as different kinds of puzzles that take longer than 5 minutes to solve, some easier than others, boss fights that are unique to those locations, perhaps exclusive loot that you can only find in these set locations, as well as plenty of lore within them relevant to the location you're in. For example, finding Kolb the dragon in a dwarven ruin is pretty funny, but it doesn't really work. That being said, not every location needs to be vastly different, however they need to be a bit more memorable and distinguishable from the last dungeon, cave, crypt or fort you delved into. Every location, this doesn't just apply to dungeons and caves and things, needs to tell some form of story. Whether that's a big one or a small one is irrelevant, it should tell a story of some form. Now, I've never been against the open, loose combat of the Elder Scrolls games, so provided they don't reinstate the hit and miss system of Morrowind and add plenty of finisher animations that don't break the flow of combat to give it a more modern finish, I think we'll be alright here. Maybe add critical hits, so if you hit someone in the head with your sword you'll do more damage than if you hit an arm or leg. I'm not sure if they did this in Skyrim, but if they did I didn't really notice. Usable weapons should include swords, daggers, two-handed swords, axes, battle axes, maces, warhammers, bows, crossbows, throwing knives, and please for the love of God bring back spears, both for use in close quarters melee combat and for throwing. Another cool addition would be different kinds of arrows, such as blunt arrows to deal concussive damage and knock your target unconscious as opposed to being lethal. The ability to lace weaponry with poison must carry over as well, adds a nice touch. Obviously the ability to enchant would also return, however we'll get more into this in the magic topic. On the topic of this, maybe put in some brass knuckles and add a skill tree for unarmed combat. Armour needs more variety aesthetically, so once you've got the best gear there's also some variations or different armours that hold up as the best as well, so there's no best armour per se. This adds more aesthetic variety. At the same time, it might be worth armour giving some ratings, but also being able to upgrade under armour. Those are the words I'm going to use, which allows you to use any gear you want to look how you want, all the while yielding protection. Those stats and the like need to hold up on the armour itself, so it does give a decent amount of extra protection to be wearing higher quality armour, such as ebony over steel. I also think it will be a cool feature to be able to modify, adjust and alter the aesthetic of these weapons and armour, so once you're done you have a unique look that fits more with you. On the topic of smithing, there's not really much that I would like to change. I think it's kind of fine as it is, so we won't dwell too much on this one. It just needs to be there in the game. Magic is one thing that I think got dumbed down a lot for Skyrim, and there's one thing I feel like stressing above all else, is that no more dumbing down is needed. If anything, it needs to be rolled back. Magic needs more variety in the next Elder Scrolls game, and it's probably one of the main reasons why I would like to see the return of class choosing, because in Skyrim it's safe to say at first this build isn't the easiest to get into, and stays relatively underpowered with regards to the rest of the game. So of course magic should be broken down into the categories as it always is: destruction, restoration, alteration, conjuration, and illusion, and of course you'll have your special abilities that are defined based on the class you choose and your race. Since shouting from Skyrim was access through the Magicka menu, let's say that that's what it is. And since we don't know anything about the Elder Scrolls 6 beyond a vague teaser that didn't reveal anything, we don't know what shouting will be replaced by, if anything. So let's just say that whatever that gimmick happens to be, it will be over on the Magicka menu as well. What would be interesting would be being able to combine spells, allowing you to simultaneously cast fire and lightning from the same hand in one spell, for example, to deal even more damage than a base spell, and be able to exploit specific enemies' weaknesses easier, which would probably be a higher level advancement if you're that far up the skill tree. Other less usual spells should be added to further your arsenal as a mage and further allow you to creatively input your approach to achieving tasks. For example, a short distance teleportation spell for players who wish to combine a mage with a stealthy class. Enchantments should be how they are. You enchant using soul gems that vary in power depending on the soul and the kind of gem used. For example, black soul gems are significantly more powerful than petty soul gems. Enchantments, though permanent with their effect on the blade, can be added to and enhanced later on down the line, and in order to maintain their effect will need to be charged with soul gems. On the whole, Magicka is one of these areas that could do with some major improvements in the Elder Scrolls 6. In my mind, Alchemy doesn't really need any changes, so we'll leave it as it is. Potions help you with a great many things that can be used to poison your weapons or regenerate health, etc, etc. You can create potions with recipes or experimentation, and when you've discovered a recipe that works, you can quickly craft that potion, if you have the ingredients. Ingredients can be found in the wild or purchased in shops. You're probably wondering, what are we talking about here? Well, actually we're talking about something very minor, which is the weather. Now, the weather is by no means a big issue, though there is one issue worth mentioning with Skyrim. It's not very immersive. Every location is stuck in the same season all year round. The northern areas are in winter, the southern areas are in like an autumn sort of period for the entire year. This needs to change. The year needs its seasons: winter, spring, summer, autumn, you know the cycle, and that should cycle across the year. Then there needs to be weather swinging within these seasons, so one day it might be bright and sunny, the next it could be cloudy or rainy, or if it's winter it might even snow atop high hills and mountains. Of course, this does depend on where the game is set, though even hotter locations will have cooler periods, so it'll be less desirable weather during winter and sunnier during summer. It would also be a cool concept if you had to dress appropriately for the weather, so in colder and wetter environments, or if the weather swings that way someday, you would need to wear an overcoat or wind up being soaked and being more susceptible to diseases and the like, which may have minor effects on your stats. Not too heavy, however, because survival definitely isn't for everyone, but it'd be cool to keep it in mind if you wanted to optimize the immersion. Diseases and things. You're out in the wilds and suddenly you've contracted a disease that affects your stats. They're usually to minimal effect, but they can be quite annoying. But as much as this is the case, I think that is their point. They are there so that you have to use potions of cure disease to get rid of them. As diseases add to the immersion, because you'll be out in the wild a lot and you're fighting animals and things like that, and people who are probably very dirty, and those germs are going to spread and you're going to catch ailments of some form or another. For the most part, these ailments shouldn't be too invasive, but some people do prefer survival, so there should be a mode which allows them to become a lot more intense, which should put emphasis on taking measures to avoid getting diseases, and at the same time affect the stats in a way that stresses that players who do contract these diseases on this survival mode actually do treat them sooner rather than later, or the symptoms may get worse and you may see even worse negative effects on your stats, which in my mind would definitely add to the immersion. Lore is something that needs to have more influence over the Elder Scrolls 6. It needs to be present at all times, so while we're playing through the game's main stories and side quests and things, or just exploring, we're always finding out new and interesting bits of Elder Scrolls trivia to further add flesh to this beautiful deep universe with lore already as rich as real life history. It is just insane how much lore is actually in the Elder Scrolls universe, so filling the Elder Scrolls 6 with bits of lore information should not be difficult at all. Though above all else, the lore needs to have a greater presence in the Elder Scrolls 6 than it did in Skyrim, because Skyrim did feel a little bit lacking on the lore front in a few places, so rectify that and all will be good. In the Elder Scrolls, the soundtrack has never failed to impress me. It has always been top-notch, incredible stuff. So for the Elder Scrolls 6, all I can ask for is more of the same. And in my opinion, this is one of the many things that forge the backbone of the Elder Scrolls, because this soundtrack creates the atmosphere, and is definitely one of the many reasons why I love the Elder Scrolls franchise. So a soundtrack to the same quality as before, or even better if they can do that, will keep me happy. On the subject of a voiced protagonist like in Fallout 4, don't do it. It was terrible. It's a sandbox RPG. We are the protagonist. We should be the protagonist. The protagonist's voice is in our head. If you give the protagonist a voice, it takes away from our input. So there are my opinions on that. just fuck off. So there you go, that is my ideal Elder Scrolls 6, compiled into one massive video. I know this has been quite a lengthy watch, but I believe that it was worth it. I do hope you enjoyed this video, however, as I really did enjoy making it. This is the kind of content that I enjoy making the most, because I can just sit down for a couple of days and work stupidly hard on this massive video. Unfortunately, that's not sustainable, but hopefully with the help of pledges over on Patreon, it will become more so. Yes, I have a Patreon. I've actually had a Patreon for a while, but I haven't been promoting it at all. And as you can see here, it is still in its infancy. But if you've seen this video and gone, wow, I want to see more content just like this, then be sure to pop over to the Patreon and pledge as little or as much as you want. Eventually, I'll be able to make more videos just like this one. Beyond that, patrons will get exclusive content alongside benefits such as the shoutouts following. So a special shout out to my current patrons, Genevieve Slunker, Joshua Astolfi, Lumistrad and Patrick Hill. But anyways, back to this video, be sure to let me know what you want to see in the next Elder Scrolls game down in the comment section. So, thank you all for watching, I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to go ahead, leave a like, subscribe, share the channel with your friends and all that wonderful stuff, and I'll see you all very soon with another video at some point.